Welcome to Tree Talk. I'm Jamie Dahl with Central State University. Today we're going to be talking a little bit with Matt Shumar, who is with Ohio Bird Conservation Initiative, and he's going to be sharing about a new publication for landowners. And then we also are going to spend some more time with Rachel Neuenfeldt, who is with the Wayne National Forest, and she's going to be sharing with us about their forest plan revision. Welcome to Tree Talk. I'm Jamie Dahl, and we are here with Matt Shumar, who's the program coordinator with Ohio Bird Conservation Initiative, and he is going to be telling us about a publication, Managing Small Forest Patches for Birds, and they're going to give us a little bit of information on this publication. So hi, Matt.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so for the past several years, we've produced resources and put on workshops with our partner organizations for not only professional foresters, but private landowners on how to manage their forest lands sustainably and with wildlife in mind. Most of our work in the past 5 to 7 years has been in southeastern Ohio because that's where most of the forest is within the state, but we've often been approached by landowners who live in northwestern Ohio or far northeastern Ohio for recommendations to manage whatever small woodlot they have for either breeding or migratory songbirds. And so for the last few years, we've been working to compile a lot of the work that has been done in the Midwest and looking at suburban and urban landscapes to put together a set of recommendations for landowners who maybe own small wooded parcels in either an agricultural or suburban developed landscape. So if you take a look at the slide 2, showing sort of landscape comparison that might look like. A lot of the work that we've done in the past is focused in landscapes that looks like that photo on the left, which is Jackson County. And so any sort of recommendations that we might make for landowners there take that entire landscape into context. We may recommend larger silvicultural practices that would benefit early succession breeders or breeding species in the post-breeding period. So a lot of mature forest songbirds like cerulean warbler actually move into disturbed habitats like clear cuts late in the breeding season before migration. But we can't make those same recommendations for landowners in either agricultural or suburban landscapes. So looking at that middle photo or the photo on the right, which are Defiance and Cuyahoga County. And so these are often very small wooded parcels. And so what we're focusing on is trying to provide a set of recommendations to enhance these forest patches. So controlling invasive species, increasing the structural complexity of those forests to make the most out of them for migratory songbirds. So those forest patches may not provide a lot of breeding habitats for area-sensitive breeding species, but they're important stopover habitats for transient migrants. So birds that are passing through Ohio that might be breeding at northern latitudes, say in Canada and even extreme boreal parts of Canada. And so we're making recommendations for landowners to not only improve their habitats, but work with their neighbors and try to increase connectivity. So encouraging forested riparian areas and forested and successional fence rows, trying to find ways to connect these small forest patches across the landscape. And the same thing applies to these suburban landscapes as well. You know, they really can't do much where there is a lot of development or permanent structures like asphalt or industrial buildings, but we can improve the conditions of those small forest patches within that landscape. So we're really excited. We spent several years compiling a lot of work that had been done in the Midwest and in urban landscapes to provide a set of recommendations and really link landowners with professionals. So trying to find local soil and water conservation districts, private land biologists, get folks connected with professionals who can help make recommendations. And we're really excited about this work moving forward. And so we had a large group of authors working on this, which is listed on slide 3, featuring biologists from a number of our institutions throughout the state. And so what we're hoping to do next is work with our partners throughout Ohio to put on a series of workshops for private landowners to get this guide in their hands and to really show them what these forest patches can look like across the landscape.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. And I think we're excited that at a future Tree Talk, we're going to actually dive more into some of the recommendations from this publication. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for sharing your time with us, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Hi, welcome to another Tree Talk, and I'm here with Rachel Neuenfeldt. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, yeah, we're very excited to hear a little bit about what you're doing for the Wayne National Forest. Can you tell us a little bit about your position?
Sure, yeah. So I am the collaboration specialist on the Wayne National Forest. I work a lot with the Forest Plan Revision team, and we'll talk about that today. I came here from state and private forestry, so the National Forest Service has a whole bunch of different branches. We work with state and private landowners. We work on the national forest lands. So came to Ohio from there, and I love working with partners and working with the public. So I get to do a lot of that in my role now.
Oh, wow, very cool. So yeah, lots of collaboration and working with
Absolutely.
different entities. Can you tell folks just a little bit more about the Wayne National Forest?
Sure, yeah. So the Wayne National Forest, I'm actually going to pull up a slide here, is Ohio's only national forest. So, there's a lot of confusion, I think. Sometimes people confuse the national parks and the national forest, or state parks with our state forests and our national forests. But the Wayne National Forest is 244,000 acres in southeast Ohio. We're broken up into a couple of different districts. So we have an Athens Ranger District, we have a Marietta Unit, and an Ironton Ranger District. But I think one of the important things about the Wayne National Forest is that, if you can see on the slide there's those dark lines that surround those units are our proclamation boundary. But we don't really own all of the land within that proclamation boundary. It's really broken up forest land. So you can see those dark patches kind of within those lines there, and that's the land that we actually own. So it makes it really hard for us to manage sometimes, and it's why our partnerships and collaboration is so important for the work we do.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, probably, I don't know if there's some of you out there that haven't got to visit this beautiful chunk of public land in southeast Ohio, but it is our only national forest in Ohio, right, Rachel?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're actually, another thing people don't often know is that we're managed by the Department of Agriculture. So it's different, again, from the Park Service and from other land management agencies. We're not in the Department of Interior like those agencies are. We're in the Department of Agriculture. So we have a whole different set of rules and regulations that we have to follow.
Very cool. So, Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about some of the land use history that is the Wayne National Forest?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that's really fascinating about living in this state and living in this part of the country, is that we have over 10,000 years of land use history, of people living on the lands, of climate changes, of ecological changes, of shifts. And, that's really had an impact on the land. So you go out and you see these forests and you see these big trees and you think, they must be so old and so majestic. But really, there's been so many changes that a lot of that history is really recent and has had a big impact. So you can see on the slide here, this photo of some of the more recent land use history. So I mentioned that 10,000 years of those ecological changes, but in recent history, especially coming into like industrial era with mining and things like that, a lot of the land and a lot of the trees were just completely barren and taken away and taken off of this land.
Right. So a lot of disturbance really that has happened and shaped the forest that we have today in Southeast Ohio.
Absolutely, yeah. So, in the past 200 years or so, we've had the trees cut down, you've had mining over a lot of the landscape, you had the iron industries here, and they were cutting timber for that as well. So you can see the just barren, scarred land that was here, only a couple of centuries ago.
Yeah, wow. So kind of boiling down quick, some rich land use history. And Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about some of the important moments in history that shaped the Forest Service and the Wayne?
Yeah. So, if you can see, there's another slide here, a picture of once the Forest Service started to acquire the land. So the Forest Service was established in 1905, not all that long ago. And we are tasked with managing the forests, but at first there was no real way to acquire land in the east. So a lot of these main forests came at first in the west. You hear about these huge forests out west, but in 1911 there was actually an act passed called the Weeks Act that allowed the federal government to acquire land here in the east. And so in Southeast Ohio, that meant that the Wayne National Forest could be created. So you started to see the federal government acquiring land within those proclamation boundaries that we showed earlier, and starting to plant trees, kind of starting to reforest this land and get it back to a more natural state. But unfortunately, you're looking at the kinds of lands that they were buying, and you saw before how barren everything was. You're really, the land that was being purchased was really old farmland. It was strip mines. It really was not land that was highly valuable.
Yeah, wow. So, and that's the history of a lot of our public lands across the country. Different, sometimes some different impacts. But, and so, I'd imagine though, the Wayne has a pretty different look and feel today. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Rachel?
we'd like to hope so. We're definitely, moving towards that. I think a lot of what we talk about today is this landscape and healing. So there's one more photo here of one of a current view of the Wayne National Forest. So if you go out today, you're not going to see these big 300-year-old trees and things like that, but what you will see are these kind of middle-aged trees, 40 to 90 years old, and a lot of different ecosystem types. And we've got this landscape that, we've got a lot of these hills and things that make for a lot of different habitats, a lot of different ecosystems out on the land. We still have that highly fragmented nature, which means that we're not able to manage the land as a big contiguous unit anymore, or at all, but we are really able to see some progress. I mean, you can see just the difference from that early picture to this one and how much that landscape has changed. And now with the Wayne National Forest, we have recreational trails, we have swimming areas, we have lakes, we have all sorts of things that people can actually do and use the forest for, as well as things like our forest products. So it's really a changed landscape, but I would still say a landscape that's healing and that's not fully at its true potential. There's still things like acid mine drainage and other effects that linger from that old use of the land.
Yeah, wow. So yeah, I agree. As someone who lives in the area, just a very rich diversity of species and kind of a biodiverse area in Ohio, but definitely still some management challenges and that fragmentation and kind of lots of different stakeholders adding to the complexity. Because your mission is definitely this multiple use concept, right?
Exactly. And that's a hard concept when you've got so many different people around who want to see different things from the landscape.
Right. Well, so one of the things that we're going to be talking more with you about is how you can manage that and kind of planning for the future. And so you'll be telling us a little bit more about that process soon, Rachel, is that right?
Yeah. So, a lot of the ways that we plan and we manage and we implement the work that we do is through our forest plan, which is this big wide plan that we'll talk about a little bit more. But that really is a big process on the forest, and it really determines some of the outcomes and how we move forward.
All right, great. So stay tuned to hear more about this planning and how you can get involved. Welcome back to Tree Talk. I'm Jamie Dahl with Central State University, and I'm here with Rachel Neuenfeldt. And Rachel's going to be sharing some more with us on the Wayne National Forest and plan revision.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, so we were talking about how we get all of this work done on the Wayne National Forest, and really the biggest thing that we do is, well, right now at least, is go through what's called a forest plan revision process. So forest plans, you can see on the slide here, are these big picture documents that every national forest has, and we have them because of this act called the National Forest Management Act that came out in 1976 that said, every forest needs this guiding document. We need this plan. And so really what this does is it guides the management practices. It's not going to tell you we're going to do this specific action right here, we're going to have this project over here, but what they do is try and balance the environmental factors, the economic factors, and the societal factors to just get a really big picture on what the future of management might look like on the forest. What are our desired conditions? What standards and guidelines do we want to follow? And it's really important that these are regularly updated. So every 10 to 15 years or so, we update these plans. And so on the Wayne National Forest, our last plan was updated in 2006. So we're right in that window there of the time to update these plans.
Time to update. And so interesting, so a lot of those complex factors, but really important to highlight that balance of the environmental and the social.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I think that's something that people often leave out. We're not just looking at the ecological or environmental factors, but really trying to make sure that we're balancing those social and economic factors as well.
Wow. And so it definitely sounds like it can be a complex process. Could you tell us a little bit about the process itself, Rachel?
Sure. And you can see here on the slide as well, just a little bit more about the process. And so it's a three-phase process, this forest plan revision. It starts with an assessment phase, and during the assessment, we're really trying to do a rapid evaluation of those ecological, social, and environmental, or economic conditions I was talking about before. And it's really a data gathering phase. So you want to kind of take a look at, well, what has changed since you did your last plan? What new information has come to light? New scientific information, new trends. Maybe you had a new factory or something open that's going to change your landscape a little bit and change the economic conditions. And then once you've done all that gathering, you move into the plan development phase. And so this is where you start actually looking at, okay, well, how do we want this to look? What's our vision for this for the future as we move forward? And then, of course, you move into the implementation and the monitoring of this plan. So it's a really big process, and it definitely takes quite a lot of time and quite a lot of coordination and people to get this done.
And so, Rachel, where is the Wayne in this process right now?
So we're still pretty early on in our process. We are in the assessment phase. So I talked a little bit about, in the slide here, I'll show just a little bit more about what that assessment phase looks like. So like I said, this is our data gathering, our information gathering phase. And we actually just reached a pretty big milestone for us. We released our draft assessment just on January 24th recently. And so this draft assessment is a kind of a combination of documents. It all encompasses this draft assessment, but we have a main document, the draft assessment document, you can see the photo there, as well as 10 supplemental reports that speak to other things that we need to include in this document that didn't quite fit the main framework. So there's a lot of really good information, and we tried to write it in a way that was accessible to the most people.
Okay, so these are documents that you want folks to read and get their input on. Is that right?
Absolutely. And in fact, we have a review period going on right now. So all of these documents are available on our website, and we're really encouraging people to go and take a look at them. Let us know, is there something missing in there? Are we not mentioning something we should? Did we mischaracterize something? People know their forests around here, and so getting that public insight and input is really important to us.
That's awesome. That's neat to include folks in that process.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about, in this assessment and all this work you've done, it sounds like you probably already know some things, have some takeaways. Can you share some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're starting to get to some of these main points that we're finding in our draft assessment. And I will say these are preliminary at this point. These could change, especially as we get more information from people. But we're starting to see that, the forests are changing. So we're having that mesification, so the shift from these oak-dominated forests to maple in our forests. And that's a big part of what we're seeing. We're seeing that recreation is changing. We're actually seeing that a lot of water-based recreation is becoming more popular. So things like kayaking and boating and other types of water uses in the forest. Of course, we're seeing that the climate is changing, so that's a big thing that's really driving everything else. All of the other changes that that are happening on the forest are driven by the climate changing as well. And then we're seeing that infrastructure demand and use is changing. So the Forest Service is really starting to look at what's called sustainable recreation. And that's taking a look at, are you putting in a ton of new things, or are you really managing the buildings that you have, and just trying to take a smart look at that. So we're seeing that shift at the national level, as well as things like roads and other things and other infrastructure across the forest, just changing in their usage or changing in their stability.
Wow. So it's really important for people to contribute their thoughts, because you're trying to make this forest work for everyone, and everyone has kind of different uses, values, and demands on that land.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, this is public land. This is the national forest system, so it belongs to everybody. So really getting people's input is really important. So on the slide here, we've got a couple of ways to get involved. So, I didn't mention it before, but we have, you can always visit our website. You can always check us out on Facebook and Twitter. We're posting about our draft assessment. We're posting about events we're having. And if you have specific questions about the plan revision, you can call the numbers here. That gets you to me, so I can always direct people where they need to go, or send us an email. But we're also having 3 open houses during this review period that, they really aren't specific to our forest plan revision, but they are really trying to set the stage and show what the whole forest is doing. So we're having them during this review period. Like I said, they're not specific to this forest plan revision, but we want to make sure that people can see that forest plan revision isn't this process that's working in a silo. It's not working all by itself. It's really part of the bigger working of the forest. So we're inviting people to come and speak with our forest supervisor, to speak with our program specialists. Our forest plan revision team will be there on 3 dates. So February 25th, we're going to be down at OU Southern in the Riff Rotunda there on campus. And then February 27th, we're going to be over in our Marietta unit at Frontier High School. And then March 3rd, we're having an open house at our headquarters in Nelsonville. So we're really encouraging anybody who wants to come to those events. Talk to us if you want to talk about forest plan revision. Talk to our program managers if you want to talk about some of the other stuff going on the Wayne. We're just really trying to encourage that dialogue and the open communication.
Absolutely, and get folks visiting, because there's a lot of folks we know in the area who haven't visited the Wayne, or maybe aren't utilizing it, and in some of the ways that don't realize the opportunities, I guess, that are there.
There's so many opportunities, and I feel like people sometimes, they use their little niche and they don't know the full breadth of what they could get from having this forest, in their backyard.
Great. Rachel, is there any way folks can give input if they can't make it to one of those meetings? What would be the best approach if they still wanted to?
Absolutely. So on our website, so if you visit the website, you can click right on our forest plan revision, and if you have comments specifically on our draft assessment, there's a comment portal right there, and we're asking that as many comments as possible go right through that comment portal, so the link is pretty prominent. And if you also, like I said, if you want to just give a call or send an email, we're always receptive to that as well for answering questions or comments, anything that might come in.
All right. Awesome, Rachel. So that seems like a great overview of this complex planning process. And if you would like, stay tuned. We're going to do one more little bit with Rachel on some of the other major projects that are happening on the Wayne. Hi, I'm Jamie Dahl, back again here for Tree Talk, and I'm with Rachel Neuenfeldt from the Wayne National Forest. Hi again, Rachel.
Hey, Jamie.
So we've been talking about some really exciting things happening on the Wayne, and I think kind of a backdrop to it all is they're managing a lot of land. It is kind of fragmented land because in the east, these public lands are butted up against private lands and kind of broken into small pieces. So some different complexity our eastern forests see. And they're balancing some kind of recreation. Of course, we see locally and across the country is gaining momentum, and that adds some complexities as well. So I don't know, Rachel, do you think that kind of sums up some of the things we've been talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. That multiple uses piece is huge, and with the national forests, it's mandated that we manage for those multiple uses, but it does add that layer of complexity, and then you hit it right on the head with the eastern forests here with that fragmentation. It only adds another layer, and so it's really it's a difficult management scheme here that we have, but we still try and do the best we can.
Yeah, and so I think there's some really cutting edge things happening actually on the Wayne, just in our own backyard here in Ohio. And so I think what's exciting is Rachel kind of selected two of these things that are happening that I think give some insights to some of these different multiple use demands that the forest is facing as well. And so Rachel, if you don't mind, let's share a little bit about these two big projects, and that'll give folks some insights to some of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is this Bailius trail system. So there's a slide for it here, and this is really a kind of a cutting edge project, like you said, and it's an 86-mile mountain bike focused trail system, although it will be open for other uses like hiking. And really the thing that's cutting edge about this is the way that it's being paid for. This is really a community-driven project, so there was a community of people who wanted to see this project on the forest, and they're paying for it with this model called Pay for Success, which really allows investors to pay into a project so that we can get the whole thing done right up front rather than having to wait for Forest Service funding, which could take years and years to get a project like this done. So we're really at the beginning here, but we're excited to see where this project goes.
Yeah, and I know I've heard, just even as someone who works in the area within natural resources, but even just as a community member, this is a really exciting project, and it has so many benefits to the communities and the opportunities for research and recreation. The way it's being paid for, I also have heard, is something that is being looked at across the country. So that's exciting, and so that's an example of recreation. And then of course, there's other uses on the forest. So do you want to share a little bit about the Sunny Oaks project as well, Rachel?
Sure. And there's another slide here on this one. So the Sunny Oaks project is down in our Ironton unit, and this is really a project that's designed to help promote our oak-dominated forests by creating early successional habitat. So this habitat is really important for wildlife conservation all across the state. And so this project, which will be implemented over about 20 years or so, is going to start to do that. And so it's working through the NEPA process right now, so there's been no decision made on it, but the planned project that we've talked with folks about will really build that habitat for wildlife conservation.
Wow, so the importance of kind of managing vegetation and kind of the ripple effect into providing important habitat.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Well, thanks, Rachel. I think we're out of time today, but please stay tuned because we'll be talking to the Wayne again to hear more about this Bailius project down the line.